Hey everyone. Welcome to AfriHeart Stories, your go-to spot for African tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe and drop a comment. Now sit back and enjoy. The night air in Ikoyi was heavy with the kind of warmth that made perfumes linger longer than they should. Music spilled from the sprawling white mansion of Teyo and Folake Adebanjo, one of Lagos' wealthiest couples. Strings of fairy lights draped over palm trees, champagne flutes clinked, and the laughter of Lagos high society floated above the rhythmic beats of Afrobeats classics. Adana stood near the balcony, her hands clasped together, dressed in a simple Ankara dress she had sewn herself. It was neat, tasteful, and modest, but here, among glittering gowns and diamond chokers, it felt like a billboard announcing she didn't belong. She smiled politely as people brushed past her, barely noticing. Her husband, Chaik, was in his element. Tall, broad-shouldered, and confident, he moved through the crowd like the host of the evening, though he wasn't. His tailored navy suit shimmered under the lights, his laughter booming as he traded jokes with politicians, CEOs, and models who leaned in a little too close. Adana watched him sip champagne, pat shoulders, and drop the names of influential people like a magician showing off tricks. She told herself she was fine just observing. That was her role, quiet support. The dutiful wife. That illusion shattered when Chaik's voice cut through the music. "Ah, my people. Wait, where's my wife?" he called loudly, grinning as heads turned toward him. Adana froze. The spotlight in conversations like this was a weapon, not an honor. She tried to stay behind the pillar, but Chaik spotted her. "Come, Ada. Come here." Every step toward him felt heavier than the last. She smiled faintly as the crowd parted, her palms beginning to sweat. Chaik threw an arm around her shoulder, the scent of whiskey wafting from his breath. "My friends, you don't know. This woman here has a voice like an angel," he announced, already grinning at the mischief in his own words. "Ada, sing for us. That church song you like." And her stomach sank. "Chaik, not here. Please." He laughed, the way someone laughs at a child refusing a harmless dare. "Ah, don't be shy. My wife is too modest." He gave her a playful nudge toward the center of the group, but there was a sharpness in his grip that told her saying no wasn't an option. Some guests clapped half-heartedly, others raised their phones. She began quietly, her voice trembling through the first few lines of a hymn. For a moment, the sound was soft enough to be ignored, until she forgot a line. It was just a second of silence, but it stretched into a void. Someone chuckled. Then another. Chaik leaned into the mic. "Ah, see? That's why I keep telling her, leave music for real singers. The only thing she can't forget is how to burn stew." Laughter erupted around her. The words landed like stones in her chest. Even the ones who tried to hide their smirks looked away from her with pity. She caught sight of Pamela, tall, slim, with long braids cascading over one shoulder, standing just behind Chaik. She whispered something in his ear, and they both laughed again, his hand brushing her arm far too comfortably. Adana's throat tightened. She forced a smile, muttered something about needing the restroom, and slipped away from the crowd. In the dimly lit hallway, she pressed her back against the wall, willing herself not to cry. She could still hear the muffled laughter from the patio, Chaik's voice carrying above the rest like a drumbeat. By the time she returned to the party, the humiliation had settled deep inside her like a bruise. She avoided eye contact, finding a quiet corner until Chaik finally tapped his glass for a toast, thanking their hosts and making yet another joke about how he brought his wife out tonight to remind her what real food tastes like. The laughter stung more than the champagne bubbles fizzing in her untouched glass. When it was finally time to leave, she walked beside him in silence, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Chaik seemed oblivious to the storm swirling inside her. He waved goodbye to friends, exchanged a final laugh with Pamela, and opened the car door for her with the kind of courtesy that was only for show. The drive home was quiet except for the soft hum of the engine. Chaik tapped on his phone, chuckling at something. Probably another message from Pamela. Adana stared out the window, Lagos streetlights sliding over her face in golden flashes. She replayed the night in her head. Every laugh. Every sideways glance. Every word Chaik had thrown at her, coated in humor but sharpened like knives. When they pulled into the driveway, Chaik stretched and yawned. "That was fun, eh? You really need to lighten up, Ada. People love a good joke. You're too sensitive sometimes." She didn't answer. Not when he reached for her hand. Not when he kissed her cheek before heading inside. She just walked past him, straight into the bathroom, locking the door. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized, eyes dulled, lips pressed tight, shoulders slightly hunched. She traced the lines of her own face, remembering a time when she was vibrant, full of life, and laughed without weighing every word. Somewhere along the years of marriage she had learned to shrink herself, to avoid making waves, to let Chaik's voice dominate every room while hers became a whisper. She pressed her palms to the sink, leaning closer to her reflection. The silence in the room felt like an answer she didn't want to hear. Something inside her shifted, not a loud explosion but a quiet, steady break. And once something breaks, it's never quite the same again. The bathroom's silence clung to Adana like a second skin. She could hear Chaik moving around the bedroom, whistling as if nothing had happened. Her fingers trailed along the cold marble of the sink before she finally turned on the tap and splashed water over her face. When she emerged, he was already half undressed, scrolling on his phone in bed. "You should have smiled more tonight," he said without looking up. "People were asking if you were upset. You embarrassed me a bit, you know?" She stood at the edge of the bed, her voice even. "I embarrassed you?" He chuckled, setting his phone aside. "Come on, Ada. Don't make a big deal. It was just harmless fun. Humiliating me in front of your friends is fun to you?" Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it. He rolled his eyes. "You're too dramatic. This is why I don't bring you out more. You can't take a joke." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing more, changed into her nightclothes and slid into bed with her back to him. The next morning, the house was filled with the smell of fried plantain and eggs. Adana cooked mechanically, her mind replaying every laugh from the night before. Chaik strolled into the kitchen in shorts and a t-shirt, humming. "I'm going to the club later," he said between bites. "You can come, but—" He glanced up. "Try to be in a good mood, eh?" She didn't respond. On the drive to her salon later that day, the streets were alive. Okadas weaving through traffic, vendors selling roasted corn, and buses blaring Fuji music. But the noise couldn't drown the thoughts in her head. She reached her shop, greeted her staff with a forced smile, and went into the small office at the back. The moment the door closed, she exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall. Her phone buzzed. "A message from Ifeoma? Ada, are you okay? I need to tell you something about last night." It was barely noon when Adana stepped out of her office to grab lunch from the nearby food stall. The street was crowded with women in colorful wrappers, carrying baskets or balancing trays. As she approached the stall, she overheard two women chatting in low voices. "Did you see Chaik's wife last night?" one said, laughing. "She looked so lost. And that singing, Chai." The other snorted. "I heard he left the party with that tall lady. What's her name?" "Pamela. They were together in the parking lot." Adana froze, her back to them. She bought her food quickly and walked away, her heart pounding. Back at the salon, she sat at her desk, barely touching her meal. The image of Chaik and Pamela whispering at the party replayed in her mind. She remembered Pamela's hand brushing his arm, his easy laugh. Her phone buzzed again, this time Ifeoma calling. "Ada," Ifeoma's voice was cautious. "I didn't want to tell you yesterday because you were already upset. But I saw Chaik with Pamela outside after you left. They were standing too close, laughing. And then," she hesitated. He touched her waist. The words dropped like stones in her stomach. "Ifeoma, are you sure? I wish I wasn't. Ada, you deserve better than this." Adana ended the call quietly. Her hands trembled, but the tears never came. Instead, there was a slow, simmering heat building in her chest. That evening, Ifeoma came over. She was tall, confident, and carried herself with the ease of someone who refused to be diminished. They sat on the veranda, the streetlights casting a warm glow over them. "I'm telling you this because I'm your friend," Ifeoma began. "Chaik has been disrespecting you for too long. Last night was just the latest example." Adana stared into her cup of tea. "I've been ignoring so many little things. Excuses. Late nights. Laughter on the phone when he thinks I'm asleep. Ada, you don't have to take this. Not anymore." There was a pause. Adana's mind was racing. "Ifeoma, what do I even do? He's not the kind of man you can confront without him twisting the story." Ifeoma leaned forward. "Then don't confront him. Watch him. Listen. Find out everything. Then you decide how to act." For the first time in years, Adana felt the weight of choice settle in her hands. Dinner was quiet that night. Adana served rice and pepper chicken, sitting opposite Chaik at the dining table. He scrolled through his phone between bites, chuckling at messages. Without looking up, he said, "Pamela called me today. She said she enjoyed the party. Maybe next time try wearing something more stylish. First impressions matter." Adana didn't flinch. "I'll keep that in mind." He glanced up, surprised at her even tone. No comeback? No sulking? She met his gaze steadily. Not tonight. He smirked and returned to his phone. But inside something had shifted. Instead of shrinking from his words, she studied him, how he smiled when certain messages came in, the way he tilted his head while typing, the quick flicker of guilt when he realized she was watching. When dinner ended, she cleared the table and went to her room. She didn't cry this time. She didn't even feel the need to argue. She just knew one thing: she would no longer be his punchline. In the quiet of her room, she took out her old laptop, plugged it in, and began searching. Emails. Bank statements. Anything that might tell her what Chaik was really doing when he wasn't mocking her in public. The game had begun. The laptop's faint hum filled the small bedroom as Adana scrolled through Chaik's email account. The password had been the easiest thing in the world: his own birthday. He was arrogant enough to believe she'd never dare look. At first, it was mundane: receipts from restaurants, bank notifications, newsletters he never read. But then she saw a thread labeled "Private," with Pamela's name in the subject line. Her finger hovered over the trackpad before she clicked. Flirtatious banter filled the screen. Jokes about last night, and how you looked in that dress. And then a week-old message from Pamela: "Don't forget to transfer my share before Friday. You know we can't have any loose ends with the investors." Adana's brows furrowed. Share? Loose ends? She opened her banking app, checking their joint account. Several large withdrawals had been made in the past 2 months, amounts big enough to make her pause, but small enough to avoid suspicion from casual onlookers. She screenshotted every email, every bank statement, and saved them on a secure drive linked to her personal email. She labeled the folder "just in case." Her heart was steady now, no longer erratic with hurt. This was no longer about just humiliation. Something bigger was at play. 2 days later, Chaik's business associate, Kunal, stopped by their home. He was in his early 40s, tall, with the kind of quiet presence that made people listen. Adana greeted him warmly while Chaik disappeared into the study to take a call. Kunal lingered by the kitchen doorway. "Adana, can I be frank with you?" She looked up from the teapot. "Of course. Chaik. He's been making risky moves in the company. Deals that don't make sense. And Pamela," Kunal's voice lowered, "she's not just some colleague. She's been influencing those deals. For her own benefit." Adana kept her expression neutral. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because when it crashes, it won't just be him. Your home, your business, everything tied to his name, will be at risk." Her pulse quickened. "Do you have proof?" Kunal hesitated, then pulled out a USB stick. "Some. Be careful." Chaik's voice rang from the study. "Kunal, let's go over those numbers." Kunal slipped the USB into her hand discreetly. "Think fast, Adana. The ground under him is crumbling." Adana stood in front of her mirror that night, wearing a fitted emerald dress she hadn't touched in years. It hugged her curves, the satin glinting under the soft bedroom light. She tilted her head, studying herself. Gone was the woman who hunched her shoulders to disappear. The next day she stopped at a boutique instead of heading straight to the salon. She bought 2 tailored suits, a silk blouse and new heels. When she walked into her shop, her staff noticed immediately. "Madam, you look different," one of them said, smiling. She smiled back. "Different is good." Over the next week, she began attending networking events, not as Chaik's wife, but as Adana, the businesswoman. She met women who had been through betrayals, humiliations, and financial ruin, and survived. Some thrived even more afterward. Their stories were like matches striking in her chest, sparking something she had almost forgotten: ambition. The opportunity came at a small dinner hosted by one of Chaik's acquaintances. About 20 people sat around a long table, sipping wine and exchanging banter. As usual, Chaik found a way to slide in a joke at her expense. "If my wife ever starts a cooking channel, the theme will be disasters in the kitchen." Laughter rippled across the table. Adana set down her fork and smiled sweetly. "True, I may not cook like a chef. But at least I'm not losing millions on fake contracts." The laughter that followed wasn't the same, it was sharper, more curious. Chaik's smile faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, his tone light but eyes narrowing. "Oh, nothing. Just a joke," she replied, echoing his favorite excuse. For the first time in years she felt the balance shift, even if just slightly, in her favor. Weeks passed. Adana used the USB Kunal had given her, piecing together a story far bigger than she had imagined. Pamela had been funneling clients away from Chaik's company to her own side business. In exchange, Chaik had been covering up her theft from joint investor funds. It was a dangerous game. They were essentially playing with other people's money. Adana met with a lawyer, presenting him with the documents. If things go south, I need to protect my assets, she explained. The lawyer, an older man with sharp eyes, nodded. You're smart to act early. Keep collecting evidence. When the time comes, you'll have the upper hand. That night, as Chaik snored beside her, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her humiliation at that party had been the match, but now she saw the fuel beneath it. This wasn't just about respect anymore. It was about survival, and making sure when the storm hit she wouldn't just be standing, she'd be standing on top. Adana's plan began to take shape like a puzzle she'd been assembling in the dark. The investor dinner was coming up, a high-profile event where Chaik would be desperate to impress. She decided that would be her stage. First, she made a quiet list of names. 3 women from her new network who were well connected to the press, one of Kunal's trusted investor contacts, and a tech-savvy cousin who could set up a secure projector slideshow without drawing attention. She called Kunal. I need your help, she said. I thought you might, he replied. What are you planning? Nothing illegal. Just the truth in front of the right people. Kunal hesitated, then said, I'll be there. But Adana, once you do this, there's no going back. She smiled faintly. I don't want to go back. She also took extra steps. She arranged for her lawyer to be on standby that night and discreetly invited 2 journalists under the pretense of covering Lagos' most glamorous dinner. By the time the evening arrived, every detail was set. All that was left was to walk into that room and hold her ground. The hotel ballroom glittered under golden chandeliers. Waiters moved like clockwork between tables, refilling glasses and delivering plates of peppered prawns and jollof rice. Adana walked in on Chaik's arm, wearing a floor-length sapphire gown that shimmered with each step. Conversations paused briefly. Those who remembered the party months ago took a second look at her now. Chaik beamed, introducing her to investors as if she were just a trophy for his success. My wife, he said with pride that didn't match the private contempt she knew so well. The evening moved along with speeches and toasts. Chaik, emboldened by the warmth of his audience, decided to reach for his old favorite trick. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, raising his glass, my wife and I have been through so much together. I sometimes say she's my biggest critic, and my worst cook. Polite chuckles rolled around the room. Adana smiled sweetly and let him have his moment. She leaned toward him. When you're done, darling, I'd like to say a few words. Chaik finished his speech with a flourish and Adana stood. Her voice was steady, the kind that made people lean in. I want to talk about trust, she began. In marriage. In business. How easily it can be broken, and how powerful it is when you keep it. The room quieted. She clicked a small remote in her hand. The large projector screen behind her flickered to life. First came emails, flirtatious exchanges between Chaik and Pamela. Then bank statements showing transfers to Pamela's account. Then internal memos and contracts Kunal had provided, proving how they diverted clients for personal gain. A murmur spread through the room. Someone gasped. A wine glass clinked against the table, forgotten in shock. Chaik shot up from his seat. What is this, Adana? Turn that off. She didn't look at him. This is the truth, Chaik. You've made me the punchline of your jokes for years. Tonight the joke is over. The silence was thick for a moment, broken only by the low hum of the projector fan. Then the room erupted, investors muttering angrily, some standing and collecting their things. One man slammed his folder shut. I will not be part of this mess, he snapped at Chaik. Pamela, seated at the far end, tried to slip out quietly, but one of the journalists intercepted her with a recorder in hand. Miss Pamela, care to comment on the accusations? Her face drained of color. No comment. She pushed past them, nearly tripping on her heels. Chaik's lips were tight with fury, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes as the investors' voices rose. We'll be reviewing our agreements, one woman said sharply. Don't call us. We'll call you. Adana stepped away from the microphone, her hands calm at her sides. She had said everything she needed to say. By morning, photos and snippets from the dinner were all over social media. The headline on a popular blog read, Wife exposes husband's affair and fraud in front of Lagos elite. The comments section was a battlefield, some people praising her bravery, others speculating about Chaik's next move. Adana sat in her salon's office, sipping tea while her staff whispered in the corner, their eyes full of a new kind of respect. Her phone buzzed. Ifeoma, you've started something bigger than you know. People are talking, Ada. They're rooting for you. Another message came through, this one from an unknown number: "You've made powerful enemies. Watch your back." Adana read it twice then deleted it. She wasn't afraid anymore. If Chike thought he could reduce her to silence again, he was about to learn she'd found her voice, and she wasn't giving it up. The days after the investor dinner were a storm Chike couldn't outrun. First came the calls, angry investors demanding explanations, threatening lawsuits. Then the cancellations, 3 major contracts gone in 48 hours. By the end of the week, Pamela's name was trending online for all the wrong reasons, and her company was being investigated for fraud. Chike sat in his home office, tie loosened, phone glued to his ear. "No, listen, this is a misunderstanding. We can work something out." He paused, his jaw tightening. "You're making a mistake." From the kitchen, Adana stirred her tea, hearing every word. There was a time she would have felt pity, but now there was only a calm detachment. That night he came into the bedroom, his face drawn. "Ada, you've ruined everything." She didn't look up from her book. "No, Chike. You did that yourself." He sat heavily at the edge of the bed. "We can fix this. Just say it was a mistake. Tell people you overreacted." Adana closed her book, her gaze steady. "I'm not protecting you anymore. Not from the truth." A week later, Chike appeared at her salon without warning. The bell above the door chimed, and every head in the room turned toward him. "Adana," he began, forcing a smile, "can we talk?" She was at the reception desk, arranging appointment cards. "We're busy, Chike. If you need something, call my lawyer. I'm not here to fight. I made mistakes." His voice softened. "Please, Ada. Don't do this to us." The customers exchanged glances, some openly watching the scene. She raised an eyebrow. "Us? There is no us anymore." One of her assistants, sensing the tension, stepped closer. "Madam, should I ask him to leave?" Adana nodded. "Yes, please." As he was gently escorted out, a round of quiet applause broke out among the customers. Adana didn't smile, but inside she felt a steady, satisfying strength. The invitation came unexpectedly, a women's business conference in Abuja, asking her to speak on resilience and self-worth. On the morning of her flight, she stood before the mirror in a tailored cream suit, gold earrings catching the light. She thought of the woman who had stood in this same spot months ago in a faded Ankara dress, shrinking under her husband's shadow. At the conference, the room was filled with women from every industry: law, fashion, tech. She spoke about dignity, about not letting someone else write your story. Her voice was clear, her words deliberate. "Sometimes," she said, "the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be silent in the face of disrespect. And when you reclaim your voice, you reclaim yourself." When she stepped down, the applause was thunderous. In the front row, Ifeoma was clapping the loudest, her smile wide and proud. The divorce proceedings had been dragging for weeks, but on this humid Tuesday morning, everything came to a head. Adana sat in the courtroom in a fitted navy dress, her hair pulled back into a sleek bun. Across the aisle, Chike fidgeted in his seat, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. Pamela was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it she'd fled to Ghana after her company's assets were frozen. The judge's voice was firm. Given the evidence presented regarding marital misconduct, financial mismanagement, and the petitioner's contributions to shared assets, this court rules in favor of Mrs. Adana Okonkwo. Chike's head jerked up. The judge continued, "The petitioner will retain sole ownership of her salon, the marital home, and 30% of Mr. Okonkwo's business shares." The words echoed in the silent courtroom. Adana's lawyer slid a pen across the table for her to sign the final documents. She did so with a steady hand, not even glancing at Chike. When it was over, Chike approached her in the hallway. "Ada, please. I know I messed up, but you don't have to take everything." She met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not taking everything, Chike. I'm taking what I earned, and what you thought I'd never fight for." He swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd do this to me." Her lips curved slightly. "That's the problem. You thought I'd always be the woman you humiliated at parties. You were wrong." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away, the sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor like the punctuation on the end of a long, painful sentence. Months passed. Adana's salon had expanded into a second location, and her story had become something of a quiet legend among Lagos business circles. Invitations poured in, from networking galas to private dinners with influential women who wanted to collaborate. Tonight, she was attending one such high society event at the very same mansion where the infamous party had taken place. The moment she walked in, heads turned. She wore a deep crimson gown that flowed behind her like a royal banner, gold jewelry glinting under the chandeliers. Her skin glowed, her posture regal. Whispers rippled through the crowd. That's her. She's even more stunning in person. Did you hear what happened with her husband? And then she saw him, Chike, standing near the bar in a plain black suit. He looked older, the arrogance dulled from his eyes. When their gazes met, he gave a small, almost hesitant nod. She returned it politely and kept walking. Later in the evening, the host invited her to say a few words. She stepped up to the microphone the same way she had at that investor dinner, but this time her voice carried no pain, only power. Respect, she began, is not given freely. It is earned. And when someone tries to take it from you, you have a choice: stay silent or stand tall. She glanced briefly in Chike's direction. He lowered his eyes. I chose to stand tall. And in doing so, I found that the most valuable thing you can own is yourself. The room erupted in applause, longer, louder, and warmer than she'd expected. As she stepped down, people stood to greet her, some reaching out to shake her hand, others simply smiling in admiration. Chike remained by the bar, watching as the crowd surrounded her. His expression was unreadable, regret, perhaps, mixed with the realization that he no longer had any place in her story. And in that moment, Adana knew she had won. Not just in court, not just in business, but in reclaiming the dignity he had once tried to strip from her. The same walls that had once echoed with laughter at her expense now shook with applause in her honor. Liked it? Thumbs up, subscribe, and join the AfriHeart fam. Your support fuels our stories. Until next time.